here's the thing, like now as an adult, I can harness that superpower and I can use it to achieve things that a lot of people would think a homeschooling mom of six couldn't do.
Yeah.
And I've actually found that, being a mom is not, it's not a handicap for me.
Mhm.
It's actually my secret superpower because I'm willing to work harder and longer, research deeper, and network more than anybody else is willing to because I have a lot on the line.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, as mothers, we're kind of given that message that you can't be ambitious and the mom. You can't do both. I've actually found that that's my superpower.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, Slick Talkers, we are back, and this is a episode that's been in the making and way overdue. Just FYI, I will take 100%. As Rose knows, that I am probably the worst responder on social media. But Rose, you
Hello.
are finally here. Welcome to the
Yes.
podcast. How are you
Thank
doing
you.
today?
I'm doing great. It was actually warm today, which is nice. The sun was out, the
Right?
plants are coming out. So hopefully here in the Midwest, we'll be able to get going with spring. That would be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be nice to defrost a little bit. I think we all could agree with that.
Yes.
I am excited to have you on. You and I got to meet in person for the first time after getting to know of each other through, I believe, the Boostly Slack group,
Yeah.
social media, all the places. We got to meet at the Level Up Your Listing Summit with Natalie and Tatiana that they got to put on, which was awesome. And it was so good to meet you in person and get to hear the story behind you and just kind of get to meet you in person. And so I'm glad we actually waited post
Mhm.
conference season 1 because we have probably 2 or 3 seasons of conferences this year. But I love to start and just go into kind of what's your story in the sense of what's your background, what eventually got you into this crazy industry we call vacation rentals and
Mhm.
hospitality and real estate, all the
Yeah.
above. I would love to know your journey.
Well, thank you for having me on. And things happen at the right time, and now is the right time for us to be doing the podcast. So, when I meet people in the vacation rental industry or at podcasts, I always stick my hand out and I go, "I'm a homeschooling mom of six." And I haven't met any other people like that in the vacation rental industry. And if you are that person, please reach out to me because we clearly need to be best friends. Uh,
Clearly.
so, I actually have a background in education. I have a master's in secondary science education. So, what that word salad means was that I was a high school science teacher at a small rural high school for a few years before we started a family. And so, I'm definitely a science geek. I love math. So, I'm the go to for math. I get excited about numbers and all that kind of stuff. But when we started a family, my husband and I made a decision that he was going to continue on in his company, in his industry, and that I was going to be staying home with our kids. I told him I would have one, and now we have six.
Mhm.
So that worked out real nice. But so we had decided that I was going to be home with the kids, and I was very excited about that opportunity for me. I'd always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and I certainly enjoyed doing that. Um, and we can fast forward a little bit into the mom journey, and we have 4 kids, and my husband, is working his job, doing his traditional stuff, and it's not really something that's fulfilling him, but it's providing for our family, and that's
Mhm.
great. Unfortunately, we had a big life event that happened. My husband was on the way to a work conference. He was driving and he was in a very bad car accident. Now, he's okay. Everybody can
Mhm.
relax. He's fully recovered. But he was in a very bad car accident. He was hit head on by another car at full speed.
Mm.
Um, he broke his ribs, his sternum was pushing back into his heart. He was having a cardiac concussion. He had a major concussion in his brain, and that concussion actually caused him to lose his memory. And so he was at the hospital, but he could not tell the people at the hospital who he was, any of his medical history, nothing. His phone and his wallet were still in our vehicle. And it took them a few hours of intense detective work to figure out who this man was. They called me, said, "Your husband's been in a car accident and you need to come here immediately."
Mm.
They wouldn't tell me if he was alive. Um, so we had 4 kids. The youngest was a baby. Put the baby in the car seat, dropped the other 3 kids off at the neighbor, and drove down to the hospital, not knowing what I was going to find there. But
Can
he,
I ask you
yes,
what was going through your head through that whole I can't even imagine
yeah,
just, like, getting that phone call for a loved one in general, so what was going through your head on the way to the hospital while you have your newborn in the back
yeah.
seat?
Well, there's 2 thoughts, and they kind of run in parallel. The first one is I'm not going to freak out, and I'm going to hold it together.
Mhm.
There's that voice that we have in our head that pushes us on, and that voice comes to me at times in my life when I really need it. And that voice told me, you were going to hold it together because your husband needs you. You're going to
Mhm.
hold it together. And then the other voice said, we're all going to therapy afterwards. So that's sort of a compromise I make. Is I'm going to hold it together in these intense, stressful situations, but we're definitely going to go to therapy afterwards. I felt confident that he was alive because I didn't think that if he was dead, they would have told me that I needed to hurry.
Yeah.
So that was my calculation. Um, but that was the 2 sides, is that you have to hold it together. You can't be a mess. He needs you to fix this. And um, you will deal with the repercussions in the future. So that's
Yeah.
that's what my brain's telling me. Um,
Yeah.
when he was recovering, he told me that he was not going to die on the way to a work conference, that was not going to be his life. He couldn't do
Mhm.
it. He couldn't do it anymore, and that we needed to renegotiate the structure. At that point, I was not going to be going back into teaching. That was not on my journey. And he was in the process of recovering. And so I needed to figure it out. I needed to figure out something that was going to support our family, that was going to give us the time together that we needed. But I was unwilling to compromise on whether I was going to homeschool our kids, stay home with them. I was going to have it all. I was going to do it all.
Mhm.
And we ended up with a piece of property that my husband bought. Sometimes when people have concussions, they do things that are from time to the time seem irrational. Um,
Yeah.
and I this has really been my story for the last 15 years. I was pregnant again. I was pregnant with baby number 5. Um, yeah, don't drink the water here. Myrtle, Myrtle. I was pregnant again, and I was going to have a baby at any moment in time. And I know, Will, you have not had a baby, but heads up, when you're about to have a baby, it's the only thing you can think of. There is no new information that you are willing to bring into your brain other than get this baby out of me. My husband said, I think we should buy this property. It has a house on it. And I said, I'm pregnant. No, that was it. So he bought it.
So he did
Um,
it anyways.
So I bought it. Actually had the baby the next day, and he thought, "It's probably not a good idea to tell Rose about this."
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I know.
Wow.
It's yes. It yeah.
Without that concussion, he would have been in the doghouse for probably a good amount of time, huh?
Oh, well, I had a close friend of mine that I was talking to because I didn't find out for 6 weeks, to be honest with you. I didn't find out for 6 weeks.
Wow.
I just had
Wow.
a baby, like,
Yeah.
I was thinking baby. And I was talking to our friend who is our real estate agent because we're in a small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Mhm.
She said, we close on the property next week. And I said, what property? I didn't, I didn't buy a property. That was how I found out. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm like, I can't believe he did this. And she said, well, are you going to divorce him? I said, no. She goes, "Then you have to get over it." So I got over it. And so I got
Wow.
over it. And it was sort of one of those, here's my beer moments. And
Mhm.
I was going to make it a success for our family. And that was how we fell into, crashed into vacation rentals.
That seems to be the most common theme with everybody is that it's not that I chose to get into vacation rentals. I stumbled, I crashed, I fell, I barricaded through, rampaged into whatever it might be, into vacation rentals. And I'm curious just to kind of backtrack a little bit for your story with all of this happening. And, your husband comes up to you and says, we need to renegotiate our structure here. Why not go back into schooling? What was the deteriorator, like, not deteriorator, but, the what was driving you away from that? What
Yeah.
made you wanna say, "No, you have this master's degree." To me, it made natural sense for you to go that route instead of
Yeah.
stumbling or waking up in 6 weeks post baby that you have a property.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, we live in a community that is more rural. And honestly, teachers don't get paid much down here.
Mhm.
Financially, it wasn't going to work for our family, especially compared to the salary that my husband was making at the time. And I came up with a lot of good ideas for him to do. He was in a very specific industry and he had a lot of very specialized knowledge. And I'm like, I would hate to see that knowledge go to waste. Why don't you work for
Yeah.
another company? Well, then I'd have less control over my schedule, which was true. I said, well, your lawyers call you with questions about this industry. Why don't you go to law school? And I'll suck it up and I'll take care of everything and you can, go to law school. There's a school close by. And he's like, "Yeah, that would be great. And I do have this knowledge, but what I'm not going to get is more time with my kids
Mm.
because it's all very fleeting and our time is very
Yeah.
limited. And I don't want to, write off 3 years. And then lawyers, they work a lot of really crazy hours.
Yeah.
That was not on his path for him. And he was very stuck. For me, I loved being with my kids. I loved educating my kids. I loved learning alongside them. I loved reading all of my favorite books. There's those books that you read when you were a kid that
Yeah.
just make your heart smile. Well, I get to read
Yeah.
those with my kids every day and it's the best. It's the best. I don't want to give that up. So
Yeah.
I had to figure it out. And failure was not going to be an option for me. So
Yeah.
I plowed forward. I've been accused of being persistent.
I would say the one thing I've noticed with your personality, especially after getting to meet you in person, I was like, man, like after I like, so for everyone who knows or doesn't know, maybe I don't have social media on my phone. I've banned from that, and I have a social media app manager that I have to log in on my computer in order to like actually access my socials. Um, I also when post my social media. Usually, I'll do it on my desktop if I can do it through there. Um, Stuff like that. So going through messages and seeing all the stuff, I'm horrible at seeing. And I did look back and I was like, man, Rose has been trying to get on the show for a while, and I have completely just been like unaware of the amount of messages. And you are a persistent person. I've seen that in
Yeah.
person. When you want to meet somebody, you have no fear of just going right up. I'm Rose. I am a stay at home mom of 6 children, not really a stay-home mom, but the sense of like you are Rose, like you make a presence and it's a good presence. I would say most people probably um would take something like that intimidating, but for you, you kind of have like this really soft but a persistent approach, which is really actually refreshing in my opinion.
Mhm,
Um, but I can see how that applies to your story in the sense of you have like that fight or flight kick in really kind of naturally came to you,
mhm,
especially not knowing. Granted, like, okay, if the hospital is telling you to hurry, yes, it's probably a good sign that there's life. But
mhm.
during that moment, I'd be bawling my eyes out. I think my flight mode would have kicked in.
Yeah. I
Um,
think we all
you
have
know,
moments in our life and we wonder how we're gonna act in those moments.
yeah,
Moments that are scary, moments where, big things are online, and we always kind of wonder how are we gonna act in those situations. I haven't talked about this on one of the podcasts before, but one of my children was born extremely prematurely.
Mm.
And I had it was a disaster. Let's just put it that way. It was a disaster.
Mm.
And it was another one of those moments where um what am I going to do? And it was that two-way conversation. I have to hold it together for this tiny 3-pound baby, and then I need to deal with it in the future. But in the moment right now, I have to hold it together for this little tiny baby. When they're 3 pounds, they don't have butt cheeks. Like, it sounds funny, but like they don't have any fat on them at 3 pounds. So their
Wow.
backs go right into their legs.
Wow.
And um, I hate to say that I have practiced with dealing with tough situations, but we all do. We all have practice
Mm.
with that. And so it's how you're able to respond in those situations, um, is how you're going to come out the other side.
Yeah. Your response for sure is the most important piece. So carry us through the story. You have this conversation with your realtor, who's also your friend, small town type situation. Tells you you close on this property in a week. Congratulations, you're not going to divorce your husband. You're gonna have this new plot of land and a home.
Yep.
What then were you guys thinking long term at all? Did you ever think like, oh, let's just rent it out, or do we do this? Do you sell your current
Mhm.
house? Like, what were the options? And then my question, kind of following that, is where does short-term rentals or vacation rentals get introduced to you? When do you hear about it through Airbnb, Verbo, some platform, or did you just kind of say, you know what, we get tons of tourism, or we have some kind of tourism around. Let's use this as a money making machine.
Yeah. So the property that my husband bought, it's gorgeous. It's 19 acres, so it's not
Wow.
a little postage stamp. It's
Yeah.
19 acres, but it also has two completely private lakes
Mm.
on there. And there was a house, it was in really bad shape. But it'd be too small for our family. We have a lot of kids now.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, we'll fix it up. I have a lot of experience project managing. I'm sure that comes as a surprise, telling people what to do. I have a lot of experience with project managing construction because we'd done a lot of projects and I'd helped people out with that. But we wanted to be able to use the lake. And if we put like a long-term renter in there, we wouldn't have been able to just go over there and use the lake and swim and
True.
kayak and fish. And so if we were to use it as a vacation rental when it wasn't occupied, we would be able to use it ourselves. That was sort of
Mhm.
the initial thinking about it. So we had, I had the cabin renovated and we started renting it out. And we're like, well, when we go on vacation, we'll go on Verbo, we'll go on Airbnb. And so we listed there. And it is very easy to list anything on those sites. And we weren't really sure if anybody would even come. But hey, we had this investment and we were going to be able to enjoy it when we didn't have guests. Needless to say, a private lake is very popular.
Yeah.
Um, and some people like to go to lake houses and maybe it's a big lake and maybe there's a bunch of other homes, but we're talking a totally private lake in the middle of the woods.
Like, and
And
not to be explicit, but I could wake up in
yeah,
the morning in my birthday
you can
suit, have a
you
cup of
can
coffee. Yeah, nice.
yeah,
Nice.
like
Like,
yeah, it's that kind of a private lake. Absolutely.
yeah.
Now, whenever I'm starting something new or I want to learn something new, I have a rule of three as I read or listen to at least 3 books on the topic. And if the books that I'm reading haven't referenced something I've already read, then I keep going. I'm not sure if that makes
Mm.
sense. Like
Yeah, yeah.
usually by the time you've read 3 books on a topic, the books that you're reading refer to other things you've already read. At that point, that's when I feel like I'm knowledgeable enough about something to put things into action. So that's my
Yeah.
rule of three. Um, so I had stacks of books and I sat at baseball practices with my highlighter taking
Yeah.
notes. I mean, there's a science teacher in me. I was in research mode.
Yeah.
And I was researching everything. I was listening to all the podcasts. I was reading all the books, and somebody would mention a book. I'd go get it and I would read it. And one of the problems that I realized sort of early on with this particular property was it wasn't big enough for us to be able to charge appropriately for what we were offering. Like it
Yeah.
was it's like a 900 square foot house. It sleeps 6 people. We really can't charge the kind of rates that we would want to in order to get financial freedom for our family.
Hmm.
So that made us think, how do we move into a niche that was going to be more profitable? One of the problems that our family always has is because we're such a big family, is we can never
Yeah.
find a home that's big enough for us.
For
And so
sure.
we thought, well, there's a lot of these little cabins around here. Let's do something big. So we went back to our friend, real estate agent, who is still our friend, uh, and she actually found it off market. It was going to be going on the market, but it was an estate sale. And she's like, this is what you're looking for, and you need to buy it right now before it hits the market. And it was exactly what we were looking for. And it is the property we have
Awesome.
now called Mount Pleasant Lodge. And once
Yeah.
we started with a big house and we saw how much more we could charge for it, it made a lot more financial sense. And that is when we fully committed to these big homes that are specifically for multi-generational family travel.
Mm.
Big homes are harder to to turn over, harder to manage. It's not difficult to market them, but it's different types of marketing, different types of
Yeah.
guests. But that is where we have ended. That is where we're focusing our brand, is on these big homes that are on totally private acreage that you can walk around in your birthday suit. I'm not sure if you want to do that in front of your family, but
Yeah.
um, to each their own.
I don't travel with my family. I'm like, yeah, I'll take a big house by myself and be like, ah,
Yeah,
there we go,
yes.
freedom.
And so we were really trying to view it as guests ourselves, is how do we
Yeah,
make something that our own family would use? And we knew we couldn't find it for ourselves, and so we hoped that other people would too. And that's
for sure.
that's how we ended up in our specific niche.
I love that. And to make a point, I love there's a common theme I've had through the years of the podcast is that a lot of the times your ideal avatar or your ideal guest is you. It is your problems. When you are traveling, what do you look for? What do
Mhm.
you experience? Lack of experience when it comes to bigger families, right? I'm the seventh child of seven. I know the struggle of trying to get all of my siblings and their kids and their spouses together for a
Yeah,
weekend, let alone
yeah.
a vacation long trip. So I love that. I have two questions for you.
Mhm.
One, I'm going to ask first because it's selfish and I want to ask it, and then it'll be a short question. And then the other one going into kind of the journey of renovating this property with your husband's concussions and just the overall injuries. I'm sure that recovery process was not fun. But first question is your rule of three. You found
Okay.
three books, three podcasts, whatever. Was Slick Talk one of those three podcasts that you listened to?
Okay,
Or was
so
I all the way at the bottom?
actually, no, and let me tell you how I figured out which podcast to listen to. Uh,
Yeah.
Again, I'm super strategic. I don't like to leave things up for chance. I Googled top vacation rental podcasts, and I went
Awesome.
through all of the lists that I came up with, and Airbnb podcasts, STR
Mhm.
podcasts, and so I had all of these lists, and then I compared who was on all of the lists, and all of the ones that have overlap, those were the ones that I listened to, and yours had overlap on all of the lists that I
Yes.
Googled. You're like, I like to be very strategic about things, and so that was
Yeah.
that was how I did it, is I Googled the best vacation rental
Wow.
podcasts and
Well,
compared all the lists.
I'm glad we were on all those lists for you. That
You
means a
were.
lot. It means
And now, 'cause
we're
that's the
doing
thing, you
something right.
couldn't have just been on one list. They had to have
Yeah.
overlap with all of the
Yeah.
other lists. So it had to be multiple lists all saying that you were the best. So, yes, you did make the
Yes.
cut.
Selfishly had to ask that one. I'm curious though on the books. I'm realizing that my attention span is very short when it comes to non-digital products. So
Mhm.
if I'm reading a book or a magazine or anything, like it has to be like on a computer or something else because I very much get distracted, but then I get distracted even more because I'm on a device. I get notifications like texts and phone calls. So what I've been doing recently has been listening to the audiobook while I'm reading the hard copy, and I have
Yes.
everything on do not disturb. That's been the best and most enjoyable reading experience of my life. Even as a kid, like when I could be reading the Nancy Drew mystery books or the Hardy Boys or anything like that, was complete silence and no distractions, I would still not be able to get through a page without having my thoughts run off. So this has been a great way for me. What books were the ones that you've been reading, and maybe do you have any that you recommend for any of the listeners, whether they're seasoned experts or if they're
Mm.
new, getting into the newbie kind of like green thumb, not green
Yeah.
thumb, new greenhorn, whatever you call it, kind of experience?
Yeah. So there were 2, and they aren't really ones that often come up, but they were more into the weeds on property management, and one was called
Yeah,
Vacation Rental Goldmine, and I don't remember the name of the author, but he's
yeah,
located, on the East Coast somewhere, but he had really great, content on, like, email marketing and how to
mm,
target the guests, and then there was another one called Vacation Rental Mastery, and that, author, his name is Rex something, I don't remember his last name, he's actually in Australia,
oh
um
wow,
and those were some of the ones that I came across early on, before I moved over, to more podcasts. I personally am a very auditory learner. So when
gotcha.
I hear something, I can remember it, which surely drives my husband crazy when I say, "Well, you said," but no, like I have always listened to the radio, always listened to books on tape when like you had your
Yeah,
Walkman and your cassette. So since I'm an auditory learner, podcasts are great for me because I
good.
absorb it and I can spit it right back out. Um,
Yeah,
so those were some of the ones that I got started in. Those are the ones that have the most notes. Um, there's another gentleman, his first name is Danny, and he has optimized my Airbnb,
mm, mhm.
which is funny. Actually don't use Airbnb, but
Yeah,
it was a good book about how to use the ranking system and stuff like that. So those are sort of the
yeah,
ones that I started off with. I know now more books that I really like. I like Julie's book, Million Dollar Listing, our Million Dollar Host, David
yeah,
Carl's book. Those are all really good ones. The Book Direct Playbook has been huge
yep,
for our company.
yeah,
And it's very strategic. There's a lot of Googling in that one too. So that
mm,
really speaks to how I love to Google things.
yeah,
But those kind of entered our journey after our company was a little more established and I was working on higher level things because I was no
for sure.
longer a newbie in it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And also, while I have it here before we jump in, and for all the listeners, if you don't watch any of the live stream of like the episodes that we put on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, we live stream all these the day the episode on audio goes out. So go check those out so you can see the Hospital the Host book #2, which Rose, you're a contributing
Our
author.
names are right
Yeah,
there. Yeah, we're
yeah.
at second to end in the alphabet.
Yeah, Rose and I are on this second volume, I guess is what you call it in the book world of Hospital to Host. So I think that should definitely go in the show notes for any of our listeners. I want to also get to read your story. I love that you're an Audible processor and learner because that
Yes.
means podcasts have uh, success when we can find people like you.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I want to kind of one, we're going to touch on the Airbnb thing. I definitely think the audience listening is going to resonate highly with you on your stance in that area. But before moving on, you kind of we've covered the podcast, the books, and I'm curious for you because your journey, like this is a pretty intense story, and I'm so glad that you and I had a podcast pre-chat before recording because I had no idea, and I'm getting better at reading without, but there's no Audible version of
Not
this
yet.
yet. So
Not yet.
once that's there, I'll definitely be covering everybody's chapters. But hearing your story, like having your husband go through such a tragic car accident to the amount of injuries, the memory loss, concussions, that for me is like a very that tugs on the heartstrings for sure, and is why I love doing the podcast and love getting to sit down with people like you to kind of talk about this. But you're going through this process, and not only is your husband changing careers, but he's having to pretty much rediscover things again from memory loss and all this other stuff. So as you're going through this, and I love that you found your niche of targeting big homes, private kind of multi-generational guests with this whole process. What was that like? Did you have to do again, have that Rose, I have to step up
Mhm.
moment while your husband's going through this recovery, going through renovations, going through all this stuff. Kids obviously at a huge factor. You are mom, you are the source of everything. Especially I remember my childhood, my dad was available. I don't care. I need mom. I don't care if she's in the middle of a phone call, if she's driving, if she's got 20,000 things going on. I always went to mom. So adding that to your plate, what was it like? Just kind of maybe I guess walk us through your journey of the recovery aspect while also going heavy Google and research into these podcasts and books and all the stuff going in between.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing was that he needed the time and space um, to recover and heal and to process what had happened to him.
Did he
And
know who
we
you
never,
were when you showed up to the
oh,
hospital?
so when I first arrived at the hospital, no,
Mm,
he didn't. And his memory started slowly coming back. Sometimes it would come back very fast, and that was scary for him.
yeah.
Because he remembered how earlier in the day our son had been in the car with him because he'd taken him to the dentist.
Mm,
But that he also knew his son wasn't there. Oh my God, is he dead? And it's like you have to sort of
mhm,
talk them down. Like, no, 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 you dropped him off at home. It's okay.
yeah,
Did I kill someone? Is this my
yeah,
fault? And like, there's a lot, and it's like, no, that's not your fault. No, the other driver is going to be okay. Um, but he needed that time and space to heal. And concussions are they're tricky business. They're tricky business, and the brain needs time to heal on its own on its own path. It's one of those times where you got to put on your big girl panties and deal with it. We have a great family. My parents live up in northern Michigan, and when I called them in my very serious voice, uh, um, my father pulled off the side of the road and threw up, and
oh, wow,
then they got in the car and drove 8 hours to our house
wow,
to to be here because we had a lot of kids.
yeah,
But that's the kind of family that we have is that we're always there for each other, and we we always try to work through things together. I know a lot of families can sometimes not always be on the same page, and we don't
yeah,
always agree about everything, but we always try to help and support each other. And I needed to support my husband while he was recovering, while we were trying to pivot. And there's going to be this overlap. And I think a lot of people experience this when they're starting their company. There's gonna be an overlap where you have to do it all. He had to recover, and he had to go back to that job because
mm,
we needed health insurance and,
yeah,
like, grocery money, and he had to suck it up and do it until our company was in a place where he could leave so that we could,
yeah,
provide our own health insurance and all that kind of stuff, and he probably left a little too early, for our comfort, and there were some very difficult times where there wasn't any money, and we couldn't hire anybody, and the people that we were working, we had to pay them, but we couldn't pay us.
yeah,
But you have to go through those hards to get to the other side, and a lot of
mm,
people, they hit those hards, and that's the point at which they give up. So I've always described myself as somebody that has a really wide bandwidth. Um, Even as a child, I was too loud, I was too involved with everything, I was too busy, I was just, like, the too much child, and my mother can
yeah,
definitely attest to that. But here's the thing, like, now as an adult, I can harness that superpower, and I can use it to achieve things that a lot of people would think a homeschooling mom of 6 couldn't do.
yeah,
And I've actually found that, being a mom it's not a handicap for me.
mhm,
It's actually my secret superpower because I'm willing to work harder and longer, research deeper, and network more than anybody else is willing to because I have a lot on the line.
yeah,
And a lot of times, as mothers, we're kind of given that message that you can't be ambitious and the mom. You can't do both. I've actually found that that's my superpower.
mm. I love it. I love it. And it's just so crazy because I love this industry for the sense of, coming from a house of women. I had 5 sisters and being very much around that like mentality of I'm a mom, so who cares? I'm still working, I'm still providing for my family, I'm still building something, I'm still doing this, whatever it might be. It was never like, oh, I'm a mom, I can't go see my friends, I can't go do this, I can't do that. so hearing you just like say that as your superpower is really cool because it's just it's very true. I think,
Mhm.
and as guys, might be hard for us to hear it. And I'm saying us, I'm putting myself in that realm, even though I'm used to it. It's hard to hear because so many of us get in our head of like, well, I have to be the caregiver. I need to be the brick that holds the family together and support and da 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 da. But in reality, it's like, no, you can actually like guys, it's okay to let your spouse or your significant other or whoever actually be Superwoman and let her take care of you sometimes. And let that naturally happen. It's a gift that you are able as Rose to be the too much child where you can focus and juggle and do so many things. Uh, because I've had conversations with a lot of people in our industry, Natalie and Tatiana, and I know the whole crew of us that was in at Level Up Your Listing. The fun conversation was we would be talking about our stories or what we're doing and da 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 da. And then people would be like, "And how long have you guys been doing this?" And someone would be, "Oh, 9 months." And then somebody would be, "Oh, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever." And then you guys have accomplished
Mhm.
in the triple speed than of what someone normally would accomplish this times the stuff in a time sense. And I'm butchering that sentence, but the amount of stuff that you guys have accomplished in such a short period of time would take people 5 years. What Rose has done from that moment of we're going to change or we're going to renegotiate our structure here to where you are today is something what could take some people a lifetime to do.
Mhm.
So,
Hey.
it is such a superpower. And I love stories like yours. And I love that you are like here to tell it because it's so encouraging that we sometimes could look down on ourselves like, oh man, we haven't accomplished this, and comparison can be the thief of joy, right?
Oh,
So we're
yes.
comparing ourselves to other people who may have more money or more properties or more whatever and have this crazy lifestyle. But it's like, no, we're all accomplishing stuff at a significant rate, significant
Mhm.
compared to what most people can do in 10 years. So,
Mhm.
it's so cool to see that. And so I guess going into another question for you, you're juggling all this stuff. What do you feel for reading your bio, I guess I'll give some context to this question. Reading your
Mhm.
bio and your guest fill out form that we have all guests do, I get to see that your kids are involved. You have them part of the experience. So kind of walk us through that superpower and what it looks like behind the scenes because you're not just like juggling the kids at home. You're at properties, you're managing housekeepers, maintenance, probably purchasing new or building new properties. I know you're building a new one.
Yeah.
So walk us through it.
What does
What's
that
that
look
day to
like?
day look like? Yeah.
Yeah, when I get that question a lot because I think, people not really sure how we homeschool kids and run
Yeah.
a business, and so it's important for everyone listening and watching to know that my husband and I both work on our company full time. Like,
Mhm.
he does the CFO stuff and I do the CEO stuff, but we are a team, and we are a team not just in work, but we are a team as a family. So
Mhm.
when I say that I homeschool the kids, it's not really accurate because we homeschool the kids and
Yeah.
we do it together. And he loves it just as much as I do. And so that's the number one thing is that I'm not on my own doing this. We are a
Yeah.
team, and it's so much more fulfilling because we're doing it as a family. So a lot of
Yeah.
times when we're doing school, we have a schedule and a structure because of course we do of how we get
Yeah.
our school work, our school tasks done. So a lot of times when we're doing school, the kids we have our school table, and the kids will be on both sides of the table working on their schoolwork, and I'll be at the head table with my computer doing my work, not my schoolwork, my work, and I'm there answering questions and helping them out with stuff. A lot of times when people think about school or homeschool, they picture like the teacher standing at the whiteboard writing
Mhm.
facts down for the kids to like absorb by osmosis, but that's not how learning
100%.
works. I've never stood at a whiteboard and wrote 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
And my kids they're very busy and they like to do a lot of stuff, and so like learning isn't like that. It's much more independent for the older kids. Usually by the
Yeah.
time they're in second or third grade and their reading skills are well enough established, a lot of them they do most of their schoolwork at their pace in the way that they find comfortable, and then we go over the things together. Um, they do math on their level, and they do their grammar and their reading at their level, and then we do a lot of other classes together as a family. We'll be
Mm,
doing science together, we'll be doing history together. So we do have a general structure to our day of when we're doing school. If I need to go out to one of the properties to get an inspection done, then my husband's going to switch in and he's going to be driving that ship while I'm gone. If it's the end of the month and he needs to close out the books for the end of the month, then I'm going to make sure that I'm home and I'm pushing the school stuff through. So
yeah.
we do a lot of communication, a lot of spreadsheets with the schedule on who does
Mhm.
what when. Sometimes it's getting up earlier to get things out of the way. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's doing things at the end of the school day. And see, the great thing about homeschooling is that I can do it whenever I want. So
Mhm.
a lot of times we think school has to happen during the day. So sometimes it works better to kick the kids outside in the afternoon and let them
Mm,
play outside while I knock out some schoolwork. And then after dinner, before bed, do schoolwork during that time frame.
mhm.
So that it gives us more of that freedom and independence. But my
Yeah.
kids are also very good about picking up their schoolwork and taking it where they need to go. So if I need to be cleaning a house, they can
Yeah.
grab their stuff. They can sit at the table at one of our properties while I'm cleaning, and they can get their schoolwork done. They
Yeah.
don't have to learn in one spot. So, one of the things that we're really looking forward to is doing some travel at the end of the month. We're going
Mm,
to the Short Stay Summit, and so my kids are all they're not going to the Short Stay Summit, but they're gonna
yeah.
go they're gonna go with us over to London.
Yeah.
They're gonna learn so much.
That's so
And
cool.
school looks like lots of different things, and learning looks like lots of different things. And one of the things that I always try to use as like a litmus test when we're doing school, is there an adult equivalent to
Hmm.
just school activity. So if you think about, like you have a math class, and in a regular school, you have a math lesson and you do it, and then you have to like wait that whole period, and maybe
Yeah.
you have to take work home. There's no like adult equivalent to that. Like when you have a real job, you do the job and then you move on to the next job.
Mhm.
And if you don't finish the job during your work hours, that's called overtime. So always try to think about structuring their life in a way that it makes sense in an adult equivalent. Um,
I love that. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
That's
and
that's
it's
such a good
helping
approach.
them it's helping them to be more independent and be more
Yeah.
self-starting, um, and they also have the time and freedom to learn things that they find very interesting.
Yeah.
My daughter is a brilliant signer. She's been taking sign language classes for 5 years.
Mm.
Wouldn't be an option for her in a regular school in the school district. My oldest
Yeah.
son, he speaks Chinese, which blows my mind. He's been doing
Yeah.
Chinese for 5 years. He's a
Jeez.
12-year-old, and I can't even believe it. We were watching a movie, and he was like, "That character isn't right for that. That character means this, not that." Like,
Oh, wow.
how did you do that? I mean, I don't know how
Yeah.
like, my 3rd and 4th kids, they are like budding engineers. They can make anything out of Legos. I mean, it's truly astonishing, and it is really great to see them be able to follow their passions,
Yeah.
and do the things that they're interested in, while I am also following my passions and doing things I'm interested in, and we're all doing that together, and it would
Yeah.
be very hard to do that in a different type of industry.
Well, it's so cool because, man, you're getting me so excited because I struggled in school.
Yeah.
I was homeschooled till 3rd grade. I came into 3rd grade not knowing my times tables, not knowing anything. I was just like homeschool to me was just playing and not really listening to my mom and dad and all that stuff. So to and my parents worked traditional jobs and my mom is a massage therapist, and so like I never really got to see entrepreneurship until way later in life. And so for you to, a lot of the times on the show we talk about, leading by example, what is, good leadership practices, and a big conversation that we have is, are you born or made? And are you born a certain way, or are you eventually molded into what you become? And, everyone's answer is a little bit different, but for you to be the mom that gets to lead by example in the sense of doing what's driving your passion, what's fueling you, what's filling your cup, It's hard to give when you don't have anything to give. And a
Okay.
lot of the times we look at people to take from to fill up our cup when in general, actually you could fill up your cup in the sense of doing something that actually naturally fills it, which I could tell from getting to know you and getting to have conversations. This is an industry that you are passionate about, and this is something that so I'm very excited. I love that. I love the way you're raising your kids and looking for adult equivalents and setting them up for success to not have like a culture shock when they turn 18 and they're paying
Mhm.
rent and working a job or starting their own business or whatever it might be. So it's so cool. Um, I love that. I'm just gonna make that comment. So there's no question tied to it. It's just I love it. I think it's
And
awesome.
I know it's not for everybody. Like if
Yeah.
you feel like homeschooling is not part of your journey, like that's okay. And
Yeah. Yeah.
you need to do what's working best for you and for your family. And I
For
know
sure.
people that, they try homeschooling, they struggle with it, and then they feel really guilty because maybe it didn't work for their family. And that's okay.
Yeah.
For us, it works really well with our personalities and our lifestyles. And I also have that background in education, which makes
Mhm.
other people feel better about me homeschooling my kids. But
Yeah.
this I learned early on the secret to being a good teacher. And do you know what that secret is?
No, I
Yeah,
don't.
you just
Please.
have to work hard. That's really what it is. There's no point in teacher education where you go into the back room and they tell you what the hokey pokey is all about. Like that never
Yeah.
happened.
Oh,
If you
wow.
wanna be a good teacher, you work hard. There you go. There's the secret. So, since I have that background in education and I knew it's, pedagogy is great and all of that kind of stuff, and I have a lot of that, but you know what? It comes down to hard work. And it's
Yeah.
like that in lots of different things in life. This is what
Yeah.
works for our family.
No, I love it. I love it. It's such a good message for everyone to hear. So I want to go into a quick shift into the conversation. You mentioned you don't list on Airbnb, which got probably a lot of our listeners' ears all perked up in a good way.
Yeah.
I definitely started in this industry coming from hotels and immediately got into the traditional vacation rental brand, right? The moving
Mhm.
mountains of the world, the Casagos, the Vacasas, you name
Yeah.
those types of brands versus the what we are seeing on the side of Airbnb hosts, where they just host on Airbnb and figure out there's this whole new world and industry behind it. And that it's actually existed pre Airbnb. It's been around for 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So with that, going into your day to day, you've talked about your responding to emails and guests and answering questions, and you're not on the platform. So how did you, when you got started, did you list it on the platforms initially to build traffic and revenue, or did you immediately out the gate build out your family's place, which is your brand and your guys' company, I believe.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep. Yep.
So you built out your family's place, and did you immediately get into that realm of book direct and owning your guest information and controlling the experience in the beginning, or how did that all shape? And if it started on OTAs, how did you build to where you guys are independent from them?
Mhm. So we did start on the OTAs. We started listing on both Verbo and Airbnb, but when we listed on Verbo, it was still VRBO.
Yeah,
We're old school, we were on Verbo before it was Verbo. So we
yeah,
started that way. And as we were growing and we were getting bigger, more expensive homes, and we were noticing that the quality of the guests that we were getting from Airbnb was decidedly lower than the quality
mhm,
of guests that we were getting from Vrbo. That was a pattern that we had noticed. Different areas are more Vrbo, different areas are more B&B, but
mhm,
for us, the quality of guests that we were getting through that platform was not the same. So as we were moving into a bigger, more expensive house, we said, let's test this out. There's the science teacher in me. Let's just list this house on Verbo and see what happens. And if we don't fill it up, then we'll put it on Airbnb too.
yeah,
And lo and behold, we filled our calendar very successfully just being on the one platform. So as we grew and we added new homes, we eventually stopped using Airbnb entirely and we were on Verbo. And that was at that point, we were pretty well established. We had three properties. My husband was leaving his job. Um, I have always wanted to build what I call a real business. Uh, and if you don't have your own website and if you don't have a book direct game, I'm sorry. you might not be a real business.
Mm.
And so that was when I practiced my rule of three to learn about how bigger, well-established vacation rental companies, focused on the Florida, folks in the Outer Banks,
Yeah.
how are they running their businesses? Because I want to be a real business and I want to learn the lessons that they have learned so that I can build our company into a real business. And that was where we started going down the track of branding, coming up
Mhm.
with our brand Your Family's Place, because just through the process of brand development, you're telling your current guests and your future potential guests a lot about who you are, what your homes are, and what their stay is going to be. All of that is just communicated through the brand.
Yeah.
Um, and that was when we were my husband was leaving his job to do this full time. And I was not willing to take the risk that one nasty guest, um, one, you know, lying person or, somebody trashing the house or something like that, that was gonna cut off all of our revenue. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna take that risk. So that was when I was working very hard and learning about marketing and book direct strategies. I listened to all of Mark's interviews, all of his podcasts, and read the book direct playbook. Had the highlighter out, all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I really wanted to build an independent brand that would attract the right guests to us, and start building that long term brand loyalty. And so we do still have our homes on Durbo, but this year we are 80% direct off of our website.
Wow.
And not only are we 80% direct, we are 40% repeat guests.
Wow.
Guest retention is super important to me because when we find a good guest, we want to keep that guest.
Yeah.
And so I read a lot of books, listened to a lot of books on guest retention, marketing to your existing guest, all of that kind of stuff, and implemented a wide range of strategies to entice them to continue to come back. And
Yeah.
when they do come back, to book direct, and that we have really seen that pay off this year, where 80% of our guests are booking directly off of our website.
Mm.
And a lot of those people are folks that have stayed with us in the past.
Yeah.
And by doing that, I'm creating a different type of value. I have revenue that comes in. I own our homes, and so I have value in the real estate. But by building a brand, I'm creating a
Mm.
separate type of value,
Mm.
that in the future, now I don't want to work forever.
Yeah.
I'm creating a separate type of value that can be monetized in the future.
Yeah. I love that. And it's so cool because the amount of money you're probably saving from OTA fees and all the other stuff on top of that with equity in real estate value, with direct business, with again repeating the fact of no OTA fees, and or at least 80% no OTA fees. And
Mhm.
then going into, the other revenue streams you're able to control through that with a brand, adding experiences. And then I've heard your cookies are quite amazing. I know you're probably not capitalizing on those, but
Oh, they are
still saying
very
like
good. Sometimes the guests will
probably
ask for
yeah,
the recipe, and I'll send it to them, but I tell them
yeah,
they really taste the best when they're in our homes.
exactly. It's like you can make this at home, but it's just gonna either make you want to come back and probably
Yeah,
sooner than you wanted to come back, or B, it's not gonna feel the same, and then you're gonna really be upset because then you're not at our home staying
that's
and
right.
having a
That's right.
yeah.
Well, and a good chef never gives away all of their secrets.
Yeah, yeah, it's all in the rose touch. The
That's
rose
right.
touch.
Well, and we like to say that being in our homes is like a warm chocolate chip cookie. And the cookies are very large. They are oversized cookies, because a big cookie is way better than a little cookie.
Yeah,
They're better that way. Um,
duh.
but that's what we like to say now. Chocolate chip cookies are the king of all cookies. Oatmeal raisins are good and they're nice, but after you have one, you still wish you'd had a chocolate chip cookie. So that's the type of experience that our guests want to have when they are arriving. They wanna have that warm chocolate chip cookie experience.
Hey, you're saying it, we're thinking it. We've been thinking it, and
That's
you
right.
you you took the words right out of our mouths, so I love that. I think
Yeah.
it's so true. Even if you had a raisin oatmeal cookie, you still wish you had a chocolate
They're
chip one.
okay, they're okay, but it's sort
Yeah,
of like
yeah,
they're okay. But what you
That
really
that's it.
wanted was chocolate. Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. No, it's so good. So, Rose, kinda give us a quick overview cap here now. So, how many
Mhm,
years from start to finish or start to today, because obviously
mm.
you're not finished, there's always more to do. Um, Start to today, how many years have you been doing it? What property count are you at? And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, you're in the process of building, like, your
It's
dream property.
big. Yeah,
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 so give
it's
us
big.
kind of catch us up to where we are today.
Yeah, we started in 2017, which I believe in this industry makes us pretty old school. So we
You're
know
one of the
we know
OGs,
what
one of the OGs.
we know what 2017, 2018, and 2019 feels like. So
Yeah.
we're doing great in 2023. We have realistic expectations. So right now we have 3 homes. Two of them we purchased, one that we built from the ground up, and then we are finishing off our fourth home right now. It's a main house. It has about 4,000 square feet. It has a bonus space above the garage as like a separate apartment, so you can throw the
Love
kids
it.
up there, or
Yeah.
the people that you don't want in the main house. And then there is a separate romantic couples retreat. I can't
Ooh,
do anything ordinary, so it's designed like a Victorian greenhouse. It's called the conservatory, so it
love
has a
it.
little outside, inside, inside, outside feel. I'm
Yeah.
very excited about that. It has a
Is there
huge
a good amount of
shower.
spacing between the main
Yeah,
house
so
between okay.
there's about like, 7,500 feet, but then we're planting a whole bunch of spruce trees in between. So there's like a
Gotcha.
little spruce forest. So that
Love
property,
it.
it's called Middle Haven. It's on 32 acres. So when we
Wow.
talk like land, like that's the kind of land
Yeah.
that I want, like big
Yeah.
land. We have 2 ponds, because why not put in 2 ponds on the side of a hill in the middle of the woods? I mean, why not?
Yeah.
There's a waterfall that connects the 2 ponds, and we
Wow.
have a basketball court there. So you have your own private basketball court. We have hiking trails throughout the whole property. It's designed kind of like a woodland cottage. It feels a little English. I like
Yeah.
to hit nostalgic notes when it comes to design, because everyone has an idea of what that feels like. So we have the kids' bedroom downstairs. You actually go through a wardrobe to get into the children's bedroom, because who
Okay.
everyone's read Narnia, and we all wanna go through a
Yeah. Of
wardrobe, do
course.
something fun. So, the kids'
Of
bedroom,
course.
you actually am having a wardrobe built. It'll look like it's 100 years old, but it opens up, and then you walk through there, and that's how you go into the kids' bedroom. So, there's a lot of fun little magical surprises in there. But
I
we are
love
at
it.
the end of construction, and, I'm ready to be done now. I'm ready to be
I
done.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. You're like, "I see the finish line, and it needs to get
Yes.
here today."
Yes.
I totally
Yes.
agree. That's awesome. I love it, and just kinda hearing all the things you guys are building into, uh, the property, the experience, the different types of situations. I love, the apartment above the garage. I love the Victorian, romantic couples retreat. Um, there's just so much I love. And one of my notes before we even hopped on the call, I took a note of like, I love that you and your family have embraced the hospitality side of vacation rentals. I think so
Mhm.
often we hear, how many properties do you have? What's your portfolio look like? What's your this? What's that? Da, da, da. And those are all great. Like these are, to each their own. We all have different goals and lifestyles and end games that we want to get to. So that's all great. But the embracing of hospitality is just the special, I think, secret sauce. And that's why obviously we're a hospitality podcast. But for you, I think it's exactly who you are, like your personality type, and just getting to hear your story. Like I think just you don't, again, it comes back to like that, the too much child. You can't leave it ordinary, right? You
No,
can't
I
do it.
can't. I
No,
can't.
and that's
Yeah.
so good. That's so good. I think more people need to embrace that if they have been told they're too much, or they're too extreme, or they're too passionate, or whatever, too whatever. Um, so it's just so cool to hear. And we're running out of time, and we have to kind of wrap up this episode. But I would love to ask you the question that we've been asking all guests recently, from a guest before you. So the
Yes.
guest before you is Alex Shapiro from Can Monkey. He
Okay.
was the guest before, and right now, the question is, what is a failure that you had in your business early or later in the game that you wish you had earlier? So something that maybe that happened recently that you wish you had happened in the first year or two, maybe, give or take.
Yeah. Something that happened recently that I don't think that we had our pricing nailed
Mm,
down appropriately. Also the last couple of years have been wild when it comes to rentals and,
yeah.
yeah. And so we had some rentals last year at the cottage at Maple Pond, which is a gorgeous property on a private lake, and people were renting it, for way too low. And my husband's like, "We can't be renting this out for $300 a night. Like, what are we doing here?" And
Yeah.
so that was a failure that we had. I wish that we had failed earlier because that was when we got dynamic pricing up and running. And so
Mhm.
we actually have a 30% increase year on year, even though everyone's talking about how 2023 is so scary. We're actually
Yeah.
30% higher this year than we were last year. Now occupancy is the same.
Yeah.
So now I understand the importance of dynamic pricing because if you're not using it, you might as well get all your cash and take it out to the fire pit and light it on fire. So, and I've had that conversation with a couple people around my area recently who are not using dynamic pricing. I said, you might as well light your money on fire. And it's
Wow.
so easy to use.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish that I would have gotten that turned on because we would have done even better in those wild years of 2020 through 2022.
For sure. I love
Yeah.
that. Now, if you had to ask a question to the next guest without me telling you who they are
Okay.
and what their experience is, and it doesn't have to be business or hospitality related, you could pick anything. What would that question be?
So my question for the next person is, if you asked your 10-year-old self what you would be when you grow up, are you that thing?
Are you that
What
today?
what did you think that you were going to be when you grew up? We ask our
I love
kids
it.
that a lot.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to help people.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that meant, but I feel like I'm doing that.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think you are. I think you are. You're hitting the nail on the head right there.
Yeah.
And now we're obviously going to link everything in the show notes, but where can people find you? Number one place you would
Yes.
love people to connect and reach out.
Yep. Well, I have two different social media channels for different types of content. So if you are interested in staying with us or learning about our properties, we're at your family's place on Instagram, Facebook. If you're interested in learning more about like the lifestyle of hosting and being a mom, I have a separate Instagram page called Hosting in the Motherhood. I separated those things out because future potential guests might not be interested in learning about Minoan or price slabs or that kind of stuff, and they don't really care about that. They just want to know how to book their vacation.
Yeah.
Um, so I have different pages with different kinds of content. So it's at your family's place for our vacation rentals, and it's hosting in the motherhood for more the lifestyle of doing all this crazy stuff.
All this crazy stuff. I love
All
it.
this crazy stuff.
I love as smart approach. I like the you separate the two. It's always two different audiences, and yeah,
It
smart
is.
move for your guests. So love that, Rose. It has been so amazing to chat with you today and to hear your story and to ask you the questions that were running through my head that I'm sure anyone who's listening was probably thinking or hopefully thinking the same. So thank you so much. We're going to put everything in the show notes. So any of our listeners, subscribers, viewers, any of you slick talkers out there, we would love for you to support Rose, reach out, give her comments of support, or ask her any questions that maybe you're struggling with if you haven't built or bought your own properties yet. I'm sure she is a great resource, and I will probably be leaning into her more often than not now due to the fact that I would love to own one. So
Yes.
thank you so much, Rose. And for all of you listeners and viewers out there, we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.